What if everything we thought we knew about human history was wrong? Not slightly off. Completely, fundamentally wrong. Over the last 2 centuries, archaeologists, divers, and ordinary people stumbling across something strange have uncovered objects and places that didn't just add to our understanding of history. They shattered it entirely. Ancient civilizations more advanced than we imagined. Cities that weren't supposed to exist. Technology that had no right to be where it was found. These aren't fringe theories or conspiracy claims. These are verified, peer-reviewed discoveries that forced historians to tear up their textbooks and start over. Today, we're looking at 5 of them, and by the end, you'll never look at ancient history the same way again. Discovery number 1, the Antikythera Mechanism, the ancient computer. In the spring of 1900, a group of Greek sponge divers were sheltering from a violent storm near the tiny island of Antikythera, between Crete and mainland Greece. The sea was too rough to work, so they waited. When the storm finally passed, one diver descended to the seafloor and found something that would take over a century to fully understand. At a depth of 45 meters, he discovered an ancient Roman shipwreck. The ship had gone down sometime around 65 BC, carrying an extraordinary cargo: bronze statues, marble sculptures, gold jewelry, glass vessels, fine pottery. It was one of the richest ancient shipwrecks ever found. But tucked among the cargo, unremarkable at first glance, was a corroded lump of bronze roughly the size of a shoebox. The statues were the exciting find. Everyone focused on those. The bronze lump was recovered along with everything else and shipped to the Athens National Archaeological Museum, where it sat, largely ignored, for 2 full years. Then, in 1902, a researcher named Spiridon State picked it up, examined it more closely, and noticed something that stopped him cold. The lump had gears, not decorative gears, not simple mechanisms. Actual, precisely cut, interlocking gear teeth, the kind of mechanical engineering that had absolutely no business existing in an object from roughly 100 BC. Stage reported his findings. The scientific community largely dismissed them. For decades, historians simply refused to accept what it was. The idea that ancient Greeks had the mechanical sophistication to build a precision gear mechanism was so far outside accepted understanding that the easier explanation, that the object was medieval, or decorative, or misidentified, was preferred over the obvious one. They were wrong. Modern analysis, using X-ray tomography and advanced imaging technology that didn't exist until the late 20th century, revealed the full truth of what this object was. The Antikythera Mechanism was an astronomical calculator, a hand-powered analog computer capable of predicting the positions of the sun and moon, tracking the metonic cycle of 235 lunar months, predicting solar and lunar eclipses up to 18 years in advance, and tracking the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. It did all of this using a system of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears arranged inside a wooden case with dials on the front and back, operated by a hand crank on the side. 2,000 years ago, someone built a device that could predict eclipses, with no electricity, no computers, no modern manufacturing, just bronze, a chisel, and mathematical knowledge so advanced that nothing comparable would appear in human history for another 1,500 years. The next mechanical device of equivalent complexity was a 14th century astronomical clock in a European cathedral, built 14 centuries later. Historians had confidently taught that ancient Greeks, despite their philosophical and architectural achievements, lacked any significant mechanical technology. The Antikythera Mechanism didn't just challenge that assumption, it obliterated it. We now know that ancient Greek civilization had mechanical engineering capabilities that we had completely, systematically underestimated for over 2 millennia. And here's what should genuinely disturb you. The mechanism was found by accident, in a shipwreck, preserved only because it happened to sink in cold, oxygen-poor water. How many similar devices existed in temples, in libraries, in the hands of astronomers and mathematicians across the ancient world? and simply decayed, were melted down, or were destroyed. We found one, almost by chance. The question isn't how advanced ancient Greek technology was. The question is how much we'll never know. Discovery number 2. Göbekli Tepe, the temple that rewrote human history. In 1994, a Kurdish shepherd named Savat Yildiz was walking through the dry hills of southeastern Turkey near the town of Şanlıurfa when he noticed something odd sticking out of the ground. He reported it to local authorities, who passed the information to German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt. Schmidt visited the site, took one look at what was emerging from the soil, and immediately understood that he was standing in front of something that would change everything. What Savat Yildiz had noticed was the top of a massive T-shaped limestone pillar, precisely carved, over 5 meters tall, decorated with detailed relief, carvings of animals, foxes, boars, cranes, vultures, scorpions. And it wasn't alone. As excavation began, more pillars emerged, then more, then entire rings of them. Massive stone circles arranged in deliberate enclosures, built with a level of architectural planning and craftsmanship that should have been impossible. Here's why Göbekli Tepe shattered everything historians believed. It was built approximately 11,600 years ago. Before pottery, before writing, before the wheel, before agriculture. Before any of the things historians had identified as prerequisites for organized civilization, someone built a monumental stone temple complex covering 22 acres using limestone pillars weighing up to 20 tons each, decorated with sophisticated artistic carvings arranged in precise geometric patterns. And they did it all without metal tools, without draft animals, and apparently without permanent settlements of any kind. The accepted historical model said this was impossible. According to everything scholars understood about human development, the sequence went like this. First, humans developed agriculture, which produced food surpluses, which allowed population growth, which created specialized labor, which eventually enabled organized religion and monumental architecture. Hunter-gatherers, by definition, couldn't organize or sustain the effort required to build something like Göbekli Tepe. They were too busy surviving. Göbekli Tepe reversed this entire timeline. The people who built it were not farmers. Analysis of animal bones and plant remains around the site confirms they were hunter-gatherers, people who had not yet developed agriculture. And yet they organized, transported, and erected 20-ton stone pillars across a massive complex that took multiple generations to build. This didn't just push back the date of organized religion and monumental construction by several thousand years. It potentially inverted the entire cause and effect relationship historians had assumed. Some researchers now propose that it wasn't agriculture that enabled religion. It was religion that enabled agriculture. The need to feed the workers, building and maintaining sacred sites, like Göbekli Tepe, may have been what drove early humans to cultivate crops in the first place, rather than the other way around. Even more unsettling, Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried. Around 8000 BC, roughly 3,000 years after construction began, the entire complex was intentionally filled in with rubble and soil, perfectly preserving everything beneath it. We don't know why. We don't know who made that decision or what it meant. We have an 11,000-year-old mystery that we cannot solve. From a civilization so far outside what we thought was possible that we don't even have a proper name for the people who built it. What else is buried under the hills of Anatolia or anywhere else in the world that we haven't found yet? Discovery number 3. The Dead Sea Scrolls. The texts that weren't supposed to survive. In the winter of 1946, a Bedouin shepherd named Muhammad ed-Dib was tending goats in the cliffs above the northwestern shore of the Dead Sea. Looking for a lost goat, he threw a stone into a cave opening and heard a distinctive sound. Something breaking. Curious, he climbed in and found clay pots. Inside the pots were ancient scrolls, wrapped in linen. He had no idea what he'd found. Neither did the antiquities dealer he initially sold them to. It took months before the scrolls reached scholars who understood what they were looking at. And when they did, the implications were staggering. The scrolls Muhammad found, and the hundreds more subsequently discovered in nearby caves over the next decade, were the oldest known manuscripts of the Hebrew Bible ever found, some dating back over 2,000 years to between 400 BC and 300 AD. Before the Dead Sea Scrolls, the oldest known complete manuscripts of the Hebrew Bible dated to around 1000 AD, meaning there was a 1400-year gap in the textual record. Scholars had no way to know how accurately the biblical text had been transmitted across those centuries of hand copying. The Dead Sea Scrolls closed that gap, and what they revealed both reassured and unsettled scholars simultaneously. On one hand, the texts were remarkably consistent with the versions transmitted down through the centuries, a testament to the care with which ancient scribes had preserved sacred texts. On the other hand, there were differences, variations in wording, passages that appeared in different forms, entire sections structured differently than in the versions historians had relied on for centuries. But the truly revolutionary find among the scrolls wasn't the biblical texts at all. It was everything else. The caves contained previously unknown texts describing a Jewish sect believed to be the Essenes, with beliefs and practices that didn't fit neatly into any previously understood category of ancient Judaism. There were texts describing an apocalyptic war of the sons of light against the sons of darkness. There were hymns, legal texts, biblical commentaries, and a copper scroll. Not parchment, not papyrus. Actual copper, engraved with text describing 64 locations where enormous quantities of gold and silver were supposedly hidden. Treasure that has never been found. The Dead Sea Scrolls didn't just reveal new information about ancient texts, they revealed an entire world of ancient Jewish thought, practice, and belief that had been completely lost to history. Preserved only because some unknown person or group placed these documents in clay jars and hid them in desert caves 2,000 years ago, apparently never returning to retrieve them. We still haven't fully excavated all the caves in the region. We still don't know everything that might be waiting there. Discovery number 4. Pompeii's secrets. What the ash preserved that history forgot. Most people know the basic story of Pompeii, the Roman city buried under volcanic ash when Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, preserved for nearly 1,700 years until systematic excavation began in the 18th century. What most people don't know is that excavation of Pompeii is still ongoing, that roughly a third of the city has never been excavated, and that discoveries made in the last decade alone have fundamentally changed what historians believed about daily life in ancient Rome. The old picture of Pompeii, and by extension Roman society, was one of strict, orderly social hierarchy. Wealthy elite in grand villas, a clear distinction between respectable public life and everything else. Romans as serious, disciplined, toga-wearing citizens of an organized empire. The new excavations tell a far messier, more human, and in many ways more surprising story. In 2019, archaeologists excavating a previously untouched section of Pompeii called Regio 5 discovered a thermopolium, an ancient Roman fast food counter, so perfectly preserved that it still had food residue in its stone containers. Analysis of those residues found duck bones, pork, goat, fish, snails, and wine, a menu showing Romans eating a far more varied and cosmopolitan diet than historians had assumed. More strikingly, the thermopolium's counter was decorated with painted images of the very foods being served, essentially an ancient illustrated menu, brightly colored and detailed, catering to customers who might not have been able to read. Also in 2019, excavators found a fresco depicting a pizza-like flatbread topped with fruit and spices, served on a silver platter alongside wine and pomegranates. Not a modern pizza, but clearly a precursor, depicted as if it were simply an ordinary part of daily Roman life. Casual, unremarkable. Someone's lunch. More disturbing were the human remains. New forensic analysis of Pompeii's famous plaster casts, voids left in the ash by decomposed bodies, filled with plaster to recreate their forms, revealed details that earlier excavators had missed or misinterpreted entirely. DNA analysis showed that a group long assumed to be a family, sheltering together, included individuals with no genetic relationship to each other, strangers, or perhaps neighbors, huddling together in their final moments. A person, described for over a century in guidebooks as a fleeing slave, was actually wearing a gold ring, a marker of free status in Roman society. Every assumption historians had made about Pompeii, about who these people were, what their relationships were, what their lives looked like, is being quietly, systematically revised as new analysis techniques meet old excavations. And again, a third of the city hasn't been touched. Whatever is under that ash, we haven't seen it yet. Discovery number 5. The Terracotta Army, China's buried secret. In March 1974, a group of farmers in Lintong County, Shanxi Province, China, were digging a well during a drought. About 1.5 meters below the surface, one of them, a farmer named Yang Jifa, hit something hard with his shovel. Clearing the soil away, he found fragments of terracotta, a bronze arrowhead, and then the unmistakable shape of a human head, made of clay. Local officials were called, then archaeologists. Then, gradually, the full scale of what Yang Jifa had struck became clear, and it was almost impossible to comprehend. In 221 BC, after conquering 6 rival kingdoms and unifying China for the first time, Emperor Qin Shi Huang began preparing for his death. He commissioned a tomb complex so vast that ancient texts described it taking 700,000 workers nearly 40 years to complete. The tomb itself, a massive burial mound, had been known for centuries. What no one knew was what surrounded it. Buried in 4 enormous pits covering an area of roughly 22,000 square meters were over 8,000 life-size terracotta soldiers, arranged in full battle formation. Not identical soldiers, each one individually crafted with unique facial features, hairstyles, and expressions. There were infantry, cavalry, archers, charioteers, and officers, arranged in precise military formation, as if ready to defend their emperor's tomb for eternity. With them were real bronze weapons, swords, spears, crossbow triggers, so well preserved that some blades were still sharp enough to cut after 2,200 years underground. Historians knew Qin Shi Huang had been a powerful ruler. What they had not grasped, could not have grasped without seeing it, was the sheer organizational, artistic, and industrial scale of what he had built. The terracotta army required a production system of staggering complexity. Workshops produced standardized body parts, torsos, legs, arms, that were then assembled and individually customized with unique heads, hairstyles, and expressions. The bronze weapons discovered with the army were coated in chromium oxide, a rust prevention technique that Western metallurgy wouldn't independently develop until the 20th century. Whether this was intentional or an accidental byproduct of the firing process is still debated. Either way, ancient Chinese metallurgy was operating at a level of sophistication that left historians genuinely stunned. And here's the part that should make your head spin. The main burial chamber of Qin Shi Huang himself has never been opened. Ancient texts describe rivers of mercury flowing through a model of his empire, with pearls representing stars on the ceiling, surrounded by traps to kill intruders. Modern soil analysis of the burial mound has confirmed anomalously high mercury levels, exactly where the texts say the mercury rivers should be. The traps almost certainly exist. The chamber almost certainly contains things that would rewrite Chinese history as dramatically as the terracotta army did. It remains sealed, out of a combination of technological caution and respect for the emperor's remains. We are sitting, right now, with one of the most significant unopened archaeological sites in human history, knowing it's there, choosing not to open it yet. 5 discoveries. 5 moments when someone stumbled across something that shouldn't exist, or couldn't be explained, or didn't fit the timeline, and the story of human history had to be fundamentally rewritten as a result. The Antikythera Mechanism proved ancient technology was centuries ahead of where we thought. Göbekli Tepe, proved civilization began thousands of years earlier than the textbooks said. The Dead Sea Scrolls recovered a world of ancient thought that had been completely lost. Pompeii keeps revealing the human complexity behind the historical myth. And the Terracotta army showed us an ancient empire operating at an industrial and artistic scale that no one had imagined. What does this tell us? It tells us to be humble. Every generation of historians has been certain they understood the arc of human history. Every generation has been wrong in ways the previous generation couldn't have imagined. The discoveries we've covered today weren't found by well-funded expeditions with advanced technology targeting known sites. They were found by a sponge diver sheltering from a storm, a shepherd boy looking for a lost goat, a farmer digging a well. The next rewrite of human history is probably already sitting somewhere underground, waiting for someone to accidentally hit it with a shovel. If you found this as wild as I did, subscribe and hit like. Every week I dig into history's most insane untold stories, and trust me, we're just getting started.